Howdy howdy, and welcome to my 50k subscriber special. In commemoration of this milestone, and also because I forgot to do anything in advance of this, I figured I would open myself up to questions in an effort to be a smidgen less enigmatic. Sorry for that, I don't like social media all that much, so I avoid it like the plague. It would be cool if I had, like, a social media manager who could field questions for me and handle that, so I could still be in contact, but not have to deal with the mental toll that I have when I use social media, but that's neither here nor there. I am here to answer all y'all's questions, and you did ask, so here I am, with responses. Quick disclaimer that this video is going to be less scripted than normal. I'll try to answer these questions off the cuff in an attempt to be a bit more genuine. Not all of them, though. Some questions are a bit more involved, and in order to ensure I don't ramble into space, I've written responses for those. So if I seem to go from well put together to neurodivergent in between sentences, that is why. With that out of the way, I think it's probably best that we start with this question, because it is both long and serves as a good base to jump off of to answer other questions. From Resivio, sorry if I mess up anyone's names. Love the content, Superdude. This is a more in-depth question, but what does your video creation process look like? What would you say is the average time it takes for you to go from concept to finished vid? Keep up the good work. You're one of my favorite creators and one of the few that I've hit the bell for. Thanks, boss. So when this channel first started out, the idea was that I was taking my tendency to obsess and info dump about various things and turn it into content. As Lindsay Ellis once said,
sometimes you've got some feelings and you just gotta monetize them.
So I did. Video ideas can either be an obsession or a tangent off of a greater video that I felt compelled to explore further, or, now that I have a genuine audience, further interest in exploring a subject based on other people's recommendations. But the important first step is the framing device. If I want to talk about thing X, whether that's GTFO, Hard Spaceship Breaker, Kaguya Love is War, anything, I need to find a proper frame to talk about it. Nothing against the longer form YouTube videos, but I really don't want to make that kind of content for myself, so the framing device is important. Keep myself focused on something. So I try to find other complementary and contrasting pieces, and I write about all of them. These aren't really meant to be critiques so much as I'm sharing something with the class, talking about my feelings and joys found in this works and the other works as seen through that framing device. After I've written it, I sit on it for a few days, proofreading it as many times as I am able before I get so bored and angry looking at it that I never want to do it again. That is when I know I am done. But I'm not quite done. I still need to go over it twice more times. The first time with a pencil and notebook to see what sort of footage I need to collect for the video. What can I record myself? What do I already have, because I've ostensibly been playing or watching the thing I'm talking about, so what do I have on hand? And what do I need to collect from outside sources? Stuff like film, stock footage, or various video game things that I couldn't make myself for multitudinous reasons. I then record using Audacity because it's free and it allows me to normalize and clean up audio, which people have given me flack for sounding like doo-doo in some of my older stuff, a sentiment that I agree with. This is when the absolute final pass of the script occurs because, you know, when you say it out loud, it might sound different, might not sound, you know, human. So as I'm saying it, I might go, oh, this doesn't work, and then edit. I then use the video editing software Wondershare Filmora 13. Why Filmora 13, you ask? Because it is free. I mean, it's not free. It has some caveats. It was certainly free to download and use, but if you don't want them to watermark your video, you gotta give them 50 bones a year. And I only discovered that after I finished the KBU video, so I ponied over the money. Didn't want them watermarking my shit. They also have other assets, but they're premium, so you have to give them an amount of money on a monthly basis, which I don't do, because I very much don't like being nickeled and dimed. As you can tell, I have a lot of animosity towards this product, but the reason why I used it in the first place is because it's very similar to Adobe's suite in terms of its feel, and I have even more animosity for Adobe, so, you know, this is the lesser evil. Something the YouTuber Noodle is also very familiar with in their work. I am more than open to using an actually free software, I just haven't spent the time to learn a different ecosystem, so it'd be more uphill than Wondershare was for me to learn. But that doesn't mean I'm not willing to switch, I just haven't done that work myself. If anybody has any better recommendations, please leave some in the comments. I'm willing to switch, it just takes some time. During this entire process, I am still watching, playing, and listening to other people's thoughts and opinions on the subject, where applicable, to ensure that I haven't made any mistakes in my reading and that I have the fullest view of the subject as I can while making it. You know, you want to be as up-to-date as you can with your opinion, and if your opinion changes, I'd obviously like to change that, but, you know, this can get prohibitive. You don't want to sit on your hands and make sure that the thing you have is perfect. It's more important to release something than make sure that it's perfect. you know, you'll get better at not making mistakes the longer you go, but you can't luxuriate over something for weeks and weeks. That's one of the major art sins that CJ the X mentions. By the way, that's a good video. You should watch that if you have an interest in making things. Finally, when the video is finished, I sit down and chart out the chapters, links, and good ad positions for the finished product so that it flows well, and then I go to a public Wi-Fi location to upload it to Patreon and YouTube. From moment of first writing to the finished video, I tend to take about 3 weeks per 30-minute chunk, but most of that time is in the editing, and the least amount of that time is in the writing. And this is also all assuming good mental health, my wrist isn't hurting from overworking, or getting distracted by other things, because I am an easily distractible person. RizD5435 asks, what's a game that you likely won't make a video on, but you love with your whole heart regardless? I want to preface this question by saying that because of my way of writing, you know, coming up with a frame and then thinking of other pieces of works that fit within that frame, there's a chance that I just haven't found a way to talk about something that I'm interested in yet. But, you know, maybe I will someday. With that aside, there are plenty of well-trodden games that YouTubers have discussed that I don't want to talk about, because I don't want to be repetitive. If I don't have anything interesting or different to say, then why should I add my voice to the conversation? As such, games that are very well-trodden or really lend themselves to multiple readings, I don't know if I need to add to. Games like Disco Elysium or Signalis. Games that I adore, by the way, but I don't really think I'm going to talk about because I don't have anything new to say on the subject. In the same vein, if it's a genre that I'm not well versed in, I'm not going to write about it. A later question that someone made asks what my opinion of the RTS genre is, and I couldn't tell you, mate. I have rarely played any of those. But to more directly hit your question, Helldivers has completely consumed my brain and soul. It is so tactical in a way that most of the children of Left 4 Dead, as I called them, aren't. And I don't really think that this is going for the same thing that is going for. But, you know, could be argued that they're playing the same space. But I'm not gonna write about Helldivers. But it's good. It's very good. Yeah. But you know that. DFS, Deed for Speed, says, congrats on 50K. Thanks, boss. Question, has there ever been a game you would want to expand upon, either by expanding its story or adding an extra mechanic? If so, what game would it be, and what would you add? For as much as I love Hardspace Shipbreaker, I think that the game doesn't have enough ships to continuously be interesting after, even near the end of the first playthrough, really. I often find myself looking on the Steam page to see if there's anything more happening with that game, because I would love if they added more ship variety. But as for adding more mechanics, I don't know if I'm well versed enough to actually answer that question, honestly. Like, it's easy to see what systems are a detriment to the game and could be removed, but to say that I have the knowledge of game design, and specifically of the game that was not made by me, that I could add something and make it better, I haven't run into that situation yet where I feel comfortable just saying, like, this could use this. But in terms of adding story, I would love if every game added story. I am super into, I got the strain of autism that makes me really interested in lore and learning about characters, which I'm pretty sure comes from the fact that Sonic the Hedgehog has a huge run in Archie comics, so when you go on his wiki, you could just find infinite amounts of information that spiral endlessly into more and more information, which I used to do in school anytime I would get done with classes. So yeah, like, I've been primed for this. I would always love if games had more of it. My Dude writes, what is your opinion on other immersive sims? Things like Dishonored, Deus Ex, Cruelty Squad, etc. Overall, do you enjoy games where you can plan something out and execute it in-game as opposed to something with predefined boundaries? Absolutely. I am a huge fan of these games. I've actually written on the subject of Cruelty Squad, specifically because Cruelty Squad is kind of a game that hates you and wants you to stop playing it. But it's Patreon only, which is why you guys haven't seen it. But yeah, I really, really like Immersive Sims, and I've played a lot of them. I noticed that one of the ones that you didn't mention is Deathloop. Deathloop has a lot of problems, but I really think that if y'all are a fan of Dishonored, Deathloop should be one that you play. It's a very, very good game. It's just, once you figure out the system, it kind of just busts open. There's something to be said about time loop games and how you gain a mastery over them. It's a bit of an interesting Oh my god, this is a video idea. Yeah, but I'm a big fan of Immersive Sims, and I feel like in this current age, we're kind of seeing less and less Immersive Sims straight up, like games that say they're Immersive Sims, and we're starting to see it just kind of bleed more naturally into other games, kind of like how RPG is a little less consistent, and you can see RPG elements in everything. Like, we didn't say that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were Immersive Sims, but they are. Look at them. Look at how their systems interact. That's an Immersive Sim. And hopefully that happens more and more, because it's certainly the case if you're looking at the history of the Immersive Sim genre that, while critically well-received, you can't guarantee that it's going to find its audience, or that it's going to make money. So, you know, if Immersive Sim design considerations bleed into the greater sphere, then that means we're always going to have a little bit of Immersive Sim in everything. And while RPGs can certainly be a plague in how they've touched everything, and maybe I would grow to regret this sentiment, I like Immersive Sims, so I wouldn't mind that world. Sock asks, if you could make a video about anything instead of video games and what I've already covered, what would it be? Moreover, what topics aren't big enough for a full video, but you do want to talk about if only briefly? Pretty much every time I've left the movie theater from an animated movie, I felt like making the video about, like, Pixar's photorealistic, if we could call it that, animation style. Their pursuit of realism is probably a better term. And how that has been the form for, I don't know, like 2-ish decades, roughly. And then all of a sudden Spider-Verse came out from Sony Pictures, and now we're starting to see a bunch of different animation styles, people that are chasing different art styles. They're not trying to pursue a sort of realism inside of the animated form, but they're willing to get a little silly with it. And I love that. I love this change. And also, you could see that, you know, Pixar isn't making as much money as it used to. There has been a cultural shift. And I felt like making that video multiple times, I just never have. Mostly because every time I go to the movie theater and I like the movie, I'm always like, wow, I want to write something about that. Like, I almost wrote a video about Barbie. There was an idea about how, like, Barbie and Shrek are very similar films. My alarm is going off. Now, the issue with that statement I just made is I literally don't remember what I was getting at when I said that. I wrote it down, and it has been months. I have no idea what I was saying anymore. And I've seen Barbie since. I couldn't tell you. But other than that, on the topic of things that aren't big enough for full videos but I want to talk about, I don't let that stop me. If you've seen my videos and then I go on a tangent and then say something like, what was I saying? Before pivoting back to the original point, that is me going off on a subject that I want to do. Because structurally speaking, my videos are very much built like my thought process. It's a bit of a roller coaster, and we hit a bunch of different subjects, basically talking about whatever I want to talk about. And hopefully by the time you hit the end of the video, you don't even realize that the amount of time has allotted. When I see comments that attribute that, they're like, wow, we hit all these different subjects and 30 minutes have passed. That is the intent. I'm glad that it is working for you. But yeah, I don't let things stop me. I'll just talk about it. Faye asks, what's your opinion on fighting and RTS games in our past and current era? Okay, so in terms of fighting game, the first fighting game that I played was the reboot of the Mortal Kombat series. I believe it was Mortal Kombat 9, maybe 8. The one where they were really boobed up. That was really my first foray into fighting games, and I played a couple of Mortal Kombats past that, but as I've said previously, I really had the greatest interest in story, and pretty much every fighting game has a really whack-ass story, so, you know, I enjoyed them from a distance, but I never really got into the mechanics. Until Guilty Gear. With Guilty Gear, I completely got deep in. I started playing it, and I got really deep into the series. It was mostly because it was just the game of the moment, and also it had a really banger metal soundtrack. And I'm big into music, guys. I haven't made a video on that, but okay. Actually, revisiting a topic about anything, music. I've thought about writing about music. In fact, the first video idea I've ever had was for music, specifically talking about, like, the history of the sound of Bring Me the Horizon. I might still do that, but yeah, like, even before the KBU thing was video number 2, in my mind at least. What was I saying? But yeah, ever since Strive, I've been trying to keep up with fighting games, watching Evo, even for games that I don't play, because I really like the sportsmanship angle and the stories that are told there, and trying to just pay attention to when Strive releases new things. I'm an Eno main, by the way, in case you want to know, though I also really liked Elfelt. I was excited for when Elfelt got dropped into the game because I don't really know how to explain it to you. When I saw Elfelt's design in Xrd, I was like, yes, I would play that character. So then when they added her to Strive, I was like, yeah, except she's not that good. Then again, why would you play a fighting game to play who's good? What, do you try hard? But yeah, I like Strive. I got Street Fighter 2, but Street Fighter is not an anime fighter, so I kind of bounced just because it required me to be a lot more honest than Eno did. That's a weird sentence. I apologize in advance if I butcher this, but Sergeira Zumovsky asks, what do you think about visual novels in general, whether it's westerns like Detroit or easterns like Doki Doki? I don't often come into contact with visual novels because of my interest in the mechanical, and, visual novels are, by their very definition, games that focus on writing more than they focus on the gameplay. That being said, I do have an intellectual curiosity with how gameplay does fold into visual novels, because, the normal design of games is mechanics, and then we're gonna figure out a story to explain why you're doing anything. But for visual novels, it's very much the opposite. Gameplay is a spice on top of the narrative. So how does it make it better or interact with it? That's curious to me. But yeah, as I said, I don't really come into contact with them often, so I really only play good ones, or have come into contact with good ones. Like Slay the Princess, though I hadn't finished it because the final update is coming out and I wanted to wait for that. The murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. Norco being a particular standout here. I have a friend who's really, really nasty for Norco and loves it to pieces. Visual novels, they're great. Very different from what I'm doing here, but that doesn't mean they aren't awesome. Thickabilly asks, what is my favorite and least favorite Root faction? It's the Lizards. The Lizards are my favorite faction by far. Just the evocative nature of being able to tear down other people's buildings and replace them with your gardens, and also replace them or appear anywhere. You really get the sense that this cult is swarming and is slowly spreading out its influence and maybe turning a whole forest into the cult of the reptile god. It's like, it's fun and evocative, even though it's very defensive, and something as simple as putting a mob token down on top of them is hard for them to deal with because they're so defensive that they barely have any offensive capability to deal with things that are sitting at their doorstep. But they're very evocative, and that makes them fun. As for least favorite faction, I honestly think it's the Keepers in Iron. They're just a little too complicated for me to wrap my head around, and I feel like I am actively making mistakes when I'm using them, because there are a lot of plates that you're spinning. As for faction to fight against, the way that the Lord of the Hundreds can spread mob tokens and their warriors are spawning constantly, it completely changes the way that you have to play the game. You need to be willing to punch people in the face. And the Lord is just so capable of continuing their assault even after you've hit them. Their ability to bounce back from damage is really, really strong, and that changes the game completely. I don't necessarily dislike that, but playing against the Lord can be annoying because it just means the entire game is now on their terms. There's often a thing that's said in the D&D subreddits about overpowered. It's like, overpowered doesn't necessarily mean that they destroy everything and they make everything trivial. It's more that if you have to change the way you think about the game, if your entire plan around monster creation or bosses or encounters has to completely change based on one character's decision, that's overpowered. And by that metric, the Lord of Hundreds is absolutely overpowered. Some games are going to be crafting heavy, some games are going to be more fight heavy, some games are going to be more defensive. Sure, this is always going to be the case, but the Lord specifically makes the game about hitting the Lord in the face for everyone at the table forever, and that's overpowered. Doesn't mean it isn't balanced, it just means the game completely changes because of the Lord alone being at the table. And that, annoying sometimes. Panis asks, for how long have you been interested in video games? Complicated question, because games have existed for the entire time that I've been alive. When I was born, there was a Nintendo 64 in the house already, and it was the thing that I played. It was everything. And I also have already relayed the story in my Children of Left 4 Dead video about going to my great-grandmother's house and playing on a cheap boxed NES. Games have always been around for me. I've always played them. And in terms of like time, technically the answer to your question is 3 years old. But in terms of the first game that really got me, like, I love this so much, I'm gonna make this my hobby, it was either Sonic Mega Collection Plus and all the games that are associated with it, because, you know, I feel like Sonic is a particularly good niche for autistic people. Like, if you like Sonic, there's a good chance you're neurodivergent. Elsewise, it might have been Donkey Kong 64 for, well, the 64. I really like that game. I actually sing the DK rap to this day, and also walk around the house singing the Lanky portion in specific, because, you know, imagine you're doing the dishes and you're doing a little bop and you go, "He has no style, he has no grace." My fiance loves that. Zumovsky returns with the second question. Have you played Disco Elysium and what are your thoughts about it? I've already touched on Disco a couple of times, but to be like perfectly clear, extremely good game. It is, you know, fantastically written, and no matter who you are, you find yourself in that game somehow. There is some aspect of Tequila Sunset that you will associate with. That's kind of the fun thing that I found from watching a bunch of analyses about Disco Elysium. Everybody finds something else, because the character of Harrier and his various thought cabinets or skills allow him to be a reflection of you, and you can find yourself in the game in the various capo types and, you know, the other aspects. I specifically played the game as a superstar hobo cop communist, and I'm sure that a lot of people have caught wind of the fact that I have a bunch of liberal, dare I say, leftist ideology. And playing the game as a character with that ideology, to say nothing of just having that ideology as inside of myself, is interesting, because this is a game made by a Soviet nation, or previous Soviet nation. You can feel a sorrow and love for the failed prospect of communism, which is very, very foreign to us Americans, or rather the Western world in general, because, you know, we grow up with a lot of content that is just sort of treating the capitalist democratic system that we have as normal. So just even having a different perspective, like Atomic Heart is the same way, like just having a game that is seeing it from that other's perspective is interesting. And then I got to the end of the game, and just the questions it is asking of me there, because I was playing a version of myself, right, were directed at Raphael Ambrosius Cousteau, sure, but also at me. And rarely has a video game really forced me to sit down and think about my socio-political and moral framework before. I won't get into it exactly, because it's still deeply personal to me, but no game has ever made me really contend with what I believe, and how strongly I am willing to defend that belief, or my place in a system that undermines them. And I think that speaks to this game's weight of choice, and its writing, of course, that it could even make me feel that, much less really sit with myself and wonder these ethical questions about how much I believe in what I believe in. Like, games as a medium primarily exist to entertain, and that's not a notion that I agree with entirely. I don't think that games just exist to entertain. I'm actually writing a video about that right now. But some games, some media challenges its user. And Disco does do that, or at least it did for me. And it is for that reason that it is excellent. And a multitude of other reasons, of course. This game really is one of the greats. Cybernex asks, how many different ways can you say hi to us? Hey, hi, hello, howdy, how are you, salutations, how are you, aloha, other way, I mean, you know, every other language is hi, I guess. You know, the reason why I actually decided that was going to be my opener is because Renata Price, former journalist, now game designer from Remap Radio or Waypoint Radio, did it, and I liked it, so I just sort of copped her whole thing. She actually has a video on Elden Ring on a YouTube channel that I can link you to if you want to watch. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, it was simply something that Renata did, and I was like, I like that. Samum Saad asks, unoriginal question, but where did the name Superdude come from? Okay, so it's first grade. I am 6 years old, and I finished the test early because I'm smart. at least for a 6-year-old. So now I'm bored and I'm sitting in class and I'm not allowed to talk or anything, so I just start doodling. And from this doodle, I decide to make comic books. And I make a couple of different comics, some of which were me and my friends going on adventures, but there were also this superhero ones because, comic books. And fundamentally what I was doing was turning my bullies into villains in the comics so that I could beat them up. And there were 3 superheroes, and they were Superdude, Astro Guy, and Brainiac. I don't know where those came from. That's just what I called them. It was just me and my 2 friends. Superdude being, the main one, and, because Superman was taken, you see, so I had to go with Superdude. And then I continued to make these comics for 7 years, all the way up until high school began for me, because, I kept getting my schoolwork done, and it was just the thing to do. Once I turned 13 and I got an Xbox, I needed something to, name myself after, the gamer tag, so I chose Superdude, and that's what carried it forward into the modern time. Once I got a YouTube channel, it was only natural to also call it Superdude. And that's the origin, just something a 6-year-old did that has carried forward 2 decades later now. I'm getting older, and it's my brand, I guess. What the dog doing? I'm doing good, how about you? And last question, saving the best for last, by Michael Stepensky. How's your cat? My cats are doing fine. I actually have 3 cats, and I figure now's a good time to share them with you. The first cat that I'm going to show here is Cheese. Her full name is the Big Cheese. She is a Torby. She's got a little bit of orange about her, and she is roughly 4 years old. We got her during the COVID times because, well, we were going to lose our minds otherwise, and also she was a baby. We honestly took them away too young. She's really, really small. She's very sweet, very proper, but she's also a rambunctious little and very, very mischievous. She's too smart. She knows to misbehave so that we will pay attention to her so that she can, direct us towards the things that she wants. Too smart, too smart. She will kill me someday. But she's a very good girl, and I do love her. Before showing her sister, I'd like to direct attention towards Ernie. This is not his original name. His original name was just Water, but over time, his name has shifted to Mr. Ernie Watterson. Ernie is, I think, 15 years old, but he doesn't look it, certainly. He's very, very spry and good for his age. He has a little bit of a hobble to his walk. That's because of an injury that he received when he was a babe, but the bone just healed wrong. He's not hurt, I promise you. But otherwise, he is a very, very loving cat, which might be because he's a boy. I've heard that boys are just much friendlier than girl cats ever are. Anyway, friendly man. He also has a propensity for farting and spitting everywhere when you give him attention. He absolutely loves attention, and it will cause him to turn into a rabid animal. But, endlessly loving and a great little beast. We also leave him outside because our girls hate him so much, so this is where he stays. He doesn't mind it, though. He very much prefers it out here, I can promise you that. He will yell at me if I bring him inside. And lastly, but not leastly, Acorn, my favorite cat and also this channel's mascot. It might be sacrilege to say this is my favorite cat, but don't worry. My fiance's favorite cat is the Big Cheese. She has made that very clear, so it's okay that I have a favorite as well. Acorn is, well, she's something. Got these wide-set eyes, small black whiskers that are pointing downwards, and some sort of respiratory issue, maybe cat allergies, that make it so she has a hard time really sniffing. As a result, she snores in her sleep. She snorts and growls when she's eating or cleaning herself, and generally she doesn't have a good smeller. Now, cats' primary sensation is their smell, so this kind of leads to her being a nervous wreck. She very much runs away from everything and anything. If it's a broom, if it's a vacuum, if it's me walking at her too fast, she will run for the hills. That being said, she loves me a great deal. She's always found near me, and she will just sort of hover around, hanging over the side of things and purr passively, like a little lawnmower, because again, she has a hard time breathing, so everything she does is loud. That's another thing. Acorn is loud. And yeah, she's a very visually distinct creature, which is why I used her for the picture of the video. But also, I was already using this picture to represent myself on like Discord and stuff, so it was just a natural extension. I honestly didn't do this on purpose. But yeah, she's a bit of a bulldog creature. She wants to be near me at all times, and she's constantly making little noises, and she's dreadfully afraid. A Chihuahua bulldog-ass cat. As opposed to Cheese, who, as I said earlier, is very prim, proper, and mischievous. A real triangle cat, circle cat situation. And yeah, that's the video. Thank you everybody who asked questions. I hope the answers are satisfactory, as well as you for watching to the end. Your attention span is impressive, and as a reward, you get a cookie. I would also like to thank my patrons, who without their contribution, I wouldn't be able to get myself a pizza on D&D nights, so that's lovely of them. Thanks y'all. But that's all from me. I hope y'all have a nice day and month and year and life. See you in the next video.